It's the Larry Kudlow Show. Free market prosperity starts here. Now, here's Larry Kudlow.
Let's talk some economics. And I want to talk some political presidential economics, too. We got John Carney, economics editor of the Breitbart News, co-author of the fabulous Breitbart Business Digest Daily. Everybody should read that thing. It's unbelievable. John, welcome back. John, I want to talk about Jay Powell and the Fed and all the rest of it. But before we get to that, at the convention and before the Democratic convention, Kamala Harris keeps talking about how Trump is going to tax consumers, you know, this, and this. She's referring to his possible proposal, by the way. It's not a concrete proposal. It was more of a musing. But his perhaps 10% tariff that he would put, although I think he's going to stay with reciprocity. But you have been one of the foremost arguing that tariffs really don't affect consumers. They're not inflationary. I think she got some numbers from Doug Holtz-Eakin's American Action or maybe some other place. But it's a phony argument. It's another one of these lies, and I thought I'd give you a chance to expound on your tariff theory.
Yeah, so what we saw during the Trump administration, remember when Trump first announced the tariffs when he was president, everybody said this was going to raise prices on consumers, and they didn't at all. I tracked month after month the consumer price index, and it was impossible to find any prices going up because of the tariffs. People say, well, how could that be? You're definitely charging money. Somebody is paying for tariffs. They're there. So what happens is that the first people who pay for tariffs are the importers. So big companies importing things are the ones who actually pay the tariffs. The question is, can they pass that on to consumers? And the answer is usually they cannot. They actually absorb it, partly through their own profit margins on imported items shrink. The other thing that happens is that foreign manufacturers, in order to stay competitive, reduce their own prices so that they can keep entering the U.S. market. They don't want to be excluded by having their prices rise, so they cut their own prices, cut their own profits. That's one of the reasons the tariffs actually hurt China much more than anybody else, because it cut into their profits. And then the other thing is you have currency adjustments. And so what happens is the dollar strengthens, which allows against the exporting country's currency, which then makes their products cheaper. It's very rare in a very big economy that the prices actually get passed through to consumers. In a small economy where they don't have much bargaining power, then yes, prices can get passed through. But Larry, everybody wants to sell into the U.S., everybody around the world. We are in some ways, people describe the Fed as the lender of last resort. We are the buyer of last resort. We are the only country that absorbs the excess production of the rest of the world. So they reduce prices to sell into us, even when we put on tariffs.
Well, that was the argument we made with the China tariffs when I was in the government. It actually hurt the Chinese companies more. And by the by, Trump cut the corporate tax enormously. So
exactly.
He gave the companies, a much bigger break relative to tariffs, for heaven's sakes.
But they got a little bit of a squeeze from the tariffs. That does squeeze the Walmarts of the world, the big importing companies. But when you couple that with a good corporate tax cut, you're actually more than offsetting it. So the profit margins went up when all the policies were figured in. And that's one of the reasons that I really don't like when people say, well, look, the tariffs are bad for U.S. companies. Sure, if you look at one policy in isolation, maybe that would hurt some U.S. importers. But you can't look at it in isolation. You look at the policy mix. And when you couple tariffs plus domestic tax cuts, that's actually that's really good for U.S. businesses.
And listen, if it pushes the manufacturing back to the U.S. and you get more manufacturing here at home, it's like a supply-side tax cut. I mean, you're incentivizing domestic producers, and presumably you're bringing money back the way we did. We repatriated about $2.5 trillion worth of American money overseas because they didn't want to bring it home because it was double taxed. And it was taxed in the country of origin, and then it was taxed when they brought it home. So they kept the money overseas. Money flows in here. It's like a supply. In a sense, it's a supply-side tax cut.
It is, and there's also a very important national security argument at all of this, not just because of like national security products, but one of the dangers is when we become dependent on any country, even allies, for key products. So, for instance, a lot of pharmaceuticals the underlying stuff comes from China or it comes from India. One of the problems with that, look, I love India; it's a great country. And I love that they are really trying to compete with China. But one of the things that the problems with being dependent is it means that we end up getting drawn into all sorts of international conflicts that we probably don't want to be drawn into. If we're producing it here at home, we're a lot less strategically entwined with the rest of the world. So that's another reason, when we have these products, we look, if we want to produce plastic toys in India or Singapore, I'm fine with that. Taiwan, that's great. But like when we need the medicine that our people need, when the underlying ingredients for that we're dependent on foreign countries for, that's a very big problem for the U.S. economy.
John, give me 2 minutes on Jay Powell and the Fed.
Look, Jay Powell made it absolutely clear in his speech in Jackson Hole that they are going to cut in September. And one of the things I was worried about happened, which was he says, we're going to cut. The time has come for a policy to adjust. What he means is the time has come for them to cut interest rates. The market immediately decided that they're not just going to cut in September, but they are going to cut every meeting for the next year and a half. So the market is now pricing in 10 or 12 cuts.
Really?
From now to
really?
The end of, yes.
Wow.
From now to the end of December. So basically every meeting they are saying there's going to be a cut. I think that is ill-advised. The Fed should cut and then wait to see what happens, right? Let it filter through. Don't rush in. Frankly, one of the things I think has happened in the world post-pandemic is I do think we are in a higher interest rate, higher inflation environment. And so that normalization is probably going to look a lot more like going from 5.5 to 3.5 or 4, rather than 5.5 all the way down to, say, 2.5% on the Fed funds rate. The market is actually pricing in the opposite. They're saying they're going all the way back down to 2.5. I don't think that's actually going to happen in our lifetime. I think that Green New Deal stuff around the world, not just in the U.S., energy policies, foreign conflict, all of the, frankly, in the U.S., aging population, all of these are inflationary forces that are going to require slightly higher interest rates in order to contain the inflation that is going to build up in the economy. Powell doesn't seem to realize that, and the market isn't paying any attention to that risk at all.
Well, I think you got a good point there. I mean, people they think they want to go back to near zero rates. It's the 2008 scenario, and quantitative easing. That's a big mistake. That's a big mistake. We should have decent, normalized. I agree with you, something around 3-4%. I mean, market rates have come down so the Fed can follow the rates down, but they shouldn't crash the rates down. And
right, we had zero interest rate policy because we were in an economic emergency in 2008. That's not supposed to be what you have all of the time. And also, back when we were doing that, one of the things that was happening was China was partly funding all of this with their excess savings, which really meant taking money out of the U.S. If we're putting an end to that, we will no longer be the beneficiaries of Chinese excess savings, buying all of our treasuries. So we really do need to rethink this. We're not going back to the 2009, 2010 QE era, but the market is pricing it in as we have. And one of the reasons, maybe, frankly, we did it for so long that a lot of these guys on Wall Street don't remember what interest rates were like before, back in 2005, right? Much less in the 1980s. so that they're basically just doing what they know, which is prices. The bond rates are going to fall back down towards zero.
You got a lot of deficit financing. Got to be careful. Start monetizing all that stuff. Could be trouble. Anyway, we'll leave it there. John Carney, Breitbart News, co-author of the Breitbart Business Digest. Thanks, John. Folks, we'll take a break. And Jason Trennert, Wall Street investment strategist, head of Strategas Research. He'll be here in a moment. I'm Kudlow. Be right back.
This is the Larry Kudlow Show.